so I'm going to go into my candy here. Okay, so this is where I left off last, where I was building just random pieces of candy. You can build your world inside here. I think it's a lot easier and kind of workflow wise if I build my world somewhere else and I just bring in the pieces of candy as needed. Okay, that's my workflow. You're free to work how you want to work. Okay, so I'm going to create a new folder or new project file. My other one stays open. So here's candy, here's Untitled 2. So even though I'm in a new one, it still keeps the other one open. I can just jump to it and then come back. All right, so I'm going to start off with a plane. So I have to have some idea of how I want my environment to be set up. Don't go cheap on the size of your grid here. This is going to be our land. So if we go too small, it's going to look odd because it's just like a tiny square. We want it to be big enough where it looks like an environment, or it looks like, you know, we could have a whole movie or something in here. All right, so that should be plenty big. I'm cutting off part of this here as I zoom out. That's part of my camera's clipping. That's not a huge deal because I'll be basically focused like way close to this area there. So that's fine that it's kind of getting cut off. I'm going to go to my object. I'm going to add in, this might be too much. Was it 83,000? That's a lot. I'm going to go to 8,000. There we go. That's a better size. My candy will come in like super tiny if it was 83,000. I'm going to add some more segments. Maybe like, I don't know, 60 and 60 should be good. And then I'm going to hit C. And now what I want to do is sculpt the terrain of this. Okay, I don't want to have a flat area because that's kind of boring. I want to have stuff here so it looks like there's stuff in the world around it. Okay, ideally I'm going to have my scene happening here, and then way in the distance I'll have like mountains and valleys and that kind of stuff. So under Sculpt, I'm going to go to Brushes, and this is where those brushes, those last little bit of hotkeys will come in. So I'm going to use Pull. Let me turn off my wireframe here. That is off. View, no. I guess I'm going to keep it on. So I can't remember how to take it off. I'm going to use my right bracket, and that will make my brush bigger. Zoom in so you can see that better. So left bracket's making my brush smaller, right bracket's making my brush bigger. Okay, and this right there is the size that is changing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag, and it's hard to see, but I just raised up some of that. So I'm going to take my pressure up some, and then you can see how I'm kind of sculpting this environment. I don't want to go too close to the edges because if I pull the edges up, it'll look like an edge, like floating in space. So I'm kind of going on the inside of this and kind of going a little bit more, inset and varying the heights. Because I want some things to have obviously more of a profile than others. So there's a big bump, and then here's some littler ones. And this will just give me a little bit of options as far as how I build my stuff. So if I wanted it to be, less hilly, I can kind of point it off into, let's say, this area. If I wanted it more hilly, I can point it off into that area. Okay? As I sculpt, this is what I'm keeping in mind because I know that my environment's going to be kind of plopped in here, and then in the background, that's what I'm creating now. What do I want that skyline to look like? I'm avoiding also touching the center of this because I don't want to have too much stuff moved in the center. It'll be very difficult to place all the candy things and whatever else there. Okay. If I get to a point where I'm like, this is cool, but now I want to add some more finer detail, I need more divisions. The more divisions you have, the more detail you can add to this. So I'm going to hold down Alt, click on the plane, or the subdivision surface, and this will subdivide it. So I'm going to take this down to 2, and then I'm going to hit C. So now I have that many divisions on here. And then I can click and drag, and you'll see how I can tweak that even further. Did. All right, so now I can go to even a smaller brush and start to sculpt in some finer details here. And again, this is all looking at what that that skyline is going to look like. You're not going to use the whole thing. We're going to be shooting this from one angle. Like we'll have 4 images. 4 images will be shot from one angle, but with different settings on the camera, just so we can play with different setups. So I'm just giving myself options. If I don't like how maybe something's maybe too bumpy, I can hold Shift, and that will smooth out what I've done there. Okay? I can use these other tools as well, so I can use Grab, and I can just grab areas and pull them up. I can use Wax. I don't use these ones too often. Here's Knife. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I think it's just adding to it, like kind of like stacking wax on top of wax is what it does, because it's just like in that area. I don't use that one too often. Most of my sculpting I do is in ZBrush, which has a lot more, like all these brushes times 100. Usually I use this just for this basic stuff. Flatten will flatten stuff out, so if you have like an area you want completely flat up here, you can see how it flattened it out. It didn't push it down, it just flattens it. Inflate will make it inflate, just like a balloon. Right? So for my bubble gum that I did, I used that on there. I created that shape, subdivided it, then used inflate to make it bigger. Amplify will move it up. It's not really good. Let me take the pressure up. There we go. So it's taking it up in up areas and down areas. Fill, what does this do? It fills in that area. Smooth it out so it doesn't look so funky. Not sure what repeat does. Let's see what scrape does. Yeah, just like scraping, it looks like parts of it. I'm not sure what that does. Okay, so you can play with a lot of these and see what you want to create. Most of the time you're going to spend it in these main areas. The only one that you may jump to is, let's say, Knife. Right, make a river, exactly. So here's my town. I know I'm going to make a bridge. I want a river there, right? So I can go, and obviously it should go somewhere. And there's a lake right here. Now, as I pull, obviously this is coming up. If I hold down Control and drag, it'll push. Okay, so any of the brushes, whatever you do for one, Control does the opposite. So if I hold Control on pull, it'll push it down. If I hold Control on Knife, it'll pull it up. Okay, it's similar to the other one, but Knife gives you a sharper profile. And then smooth that out. And I may want to use pinch on this also, just to kind of pinch the river together some. Keeping in mind, we probably won't see the bottom of the river, so as long as I have some kind of crevice there, it should be fine. And then Knife again. Maybe I'll grab this. Okay, and again, my scene might be something like this, where I see a form of a river there, but I'm not actually seeing the very bottom of the river, or I'm not seeing where that goes in. Same thing here, I may have the lake area, but I don't actually see the full-blown lake. I'll push that down some more.
So, how would you fill in the river?
I'll show you that in a second. There we go. Okay, so, spoiler alert. Yeah. All right, so if I deselect, you can see there's my ground. Now we can come back to this at any time and still tweak it. So if I wanted to modify where the river goes or tweak, change something, whatever it is, I can always jump back in and fix it. So to fill the river, you start off with a plane, and then you just scale it. Oops. There you go. And then we just move it so that it's right there. So now you'll see how it fits basically like right where that river would be. If you wanted something more complex than that, you could definitely go through and actually like sculpt the river some if you wanted. So if the river was to be like a waterfall, or it comes up and then comes down some, you could have those kinds of things in there too. You would just then sculpt this area as well. Okay, and sometimes it might even be just grabbing, let's say, faces, and then moving the faces up or moving the faces down or whatever that would be. There we go. All right, so that's how you'll create your environment. And then for all of your stuff, you just go into your Candy, grab something, and then copy paste. Okay, the same way we do something from like Word or whatever. Just turn off all my stuff. So I know that like my cupcakes, that's something that I'm going to use. So I'm going to go in here and grab the cupcake. Yes, that's cool. I'm going to just grab the group, copy it, go into the other one, paste it, and then there's my cupcake. And now I can decide what it is I want to do with it. Depending on your own plans for how you want things set up, some things will be manually placed. So when I built that cabin that I showed you, all those pieces were just manually placed where the cabin would be. Let me open up that file so if you don't remember, you can see it. Candy World. There it is. Let me turn off my cloner here, turn off that. Whoops. There you go. So all of these pieces were manually placed. So I just built this cabin, this is a cube, or yeah, this is a cube, and then I just textured it. I'll show texturing another time how I did that specifically. But all these were placed. All the cake pops that are in the back and all these cupcakes, those were cloned and then positioned so that they look like they were in a different spot. So let me go to my Untitled here, which I should probably save. I'm going to Alt-click on my cupcake, or click on my cupcake and then go to Alt-click on the cloner so that it gets cloned. I'm going to grid array this. And a grid array will basically duplicate it so that you have, in this case, 3 in the X, 3 in the Y, and 3 in the Z in a grid. I don't need that many in the Y, so I'll just say 1. And then as I stretch out the size of this, and the size of this, okay, and then I can go to my MoGraph, and under the effectors, I can start to play with the way that they're going to look as a whole. Right now, everything being uniform is very boring, so I'm going to go to Random. You have to make sure the cloner is selected. That way, when you have the Effectors tab, the random is inside there. If you didn't, all you have to do is just drag the random into the effector for the cloner, and now it'll affect it. So if I go to the random and I say Scale, and let's say I say Uniform, Absolute, oops, that's too much, 3, you'll see that there's a random scaling happening between all these, okay? Same thing with rotation. I don't want them all to be rotated the exact same way, so I will rotate them randomly. I don't want to do it obviously this way, that doesn't work, or this way, that doesn't work, but this way works good. And if I punch in 360, that should give me every degree of rotation random, okay? And then for this, I can control their random spacing. And if I need more of them, I'll go to the cloner, hit the object, and then I can just increase how many of these I have. Now keep in mind that if they're touching like this, from that angle, you can't see that, okay? So again, this will kind of depend on how your end camera shot or what your vision is as to how that's set up. If they are touching and you're like, I really don't want them to be touching, if I go to the random, I just click the seed number, it'll change how it's distributing those. So I may find a pattern that works better, or I may need to go to the cloner and space them further apart. Or go to the random and change their coordinates so that they're more closer to where they were at the start of this. There we go. Okay. Now I can take that random, or the cloner, and just move it where I want this to be. So if this is going to be, let's say my camera is coming from here. Let me find a good angle here. Something like that. Yeah, I think I like this way better. I like having more of like a hilly area here, a mountain area that kind of comes down, and then I can put those cupcakes on that side. So I'm just going to move the cupcakes to that open area. And then this way, as I'm sitting in here looking at that, I can kind of figure out how high up I want that to be. If I see a bottom, well, then I can go to my cloner. Go to my random and take the Y to 0. And now they won't be in the Y direction. If they are in the Y direction, let me jump to a side view so you can see this. As they scale, they're coming away from that origin. Okay, as they get bigger, they're getting bigger like this. So what I want to do is take their pivot, just like I was showing before, and put it right at the bottom. That way, as it scales from the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to go to my cupcake. I'll turn the cloner off so we can see this. You'll see the pivots right here in the middle. If I hit L, drag this to the bottom of that. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just close. Hit L again, turn my cloner on. You'll see that now all the cloners are perfectly on that ground. And so now when I come over here and I'm lining this up, I know that I can just grab the cloner, move the whole thing down, and there shouldn't be any that are kind of floating. And then from here, I can really start to customize, like, okay, well, maybe I want this to be really spaced out like that. Like I have a whole area. Maybe because they're behind that mountain, I need them to be even bigger. So that way they kind of poke out over here too. Maybe even a little bit bigger, 7. That's good. Okay, now if I turn off my cloner for a second, go back to the original cupcake, and then I just give this some materials. So there's that piece, and there's that piece. So this one will be cupcake, what's the thing called? Paper. And then this one will be called cupcake top. And if I had, just like I showed before, the cream on it, then I could have another material for cream. If I had sprinkles, another material for sprinkles, and so on. So for the top of this, I'm going to give this a mountainy kind of color, so it's going to be kind of orangey. Like that. That's cool. I'll take my reflectance to Beckman, take the roughness up, my specular down. I'm looking at this. That's what my result is going to be. I also may want to go to the bump, and I'm going to add inside here a noise pattern. And that will give me some kind of randomness that will happen on top of it to make it look more like cupcake top, without any things on there, so it has like pits in it. If I go into the noise and I choose from here, one of these is, let's see, cell noise. And you can see it on there too, like that's not what I want. Not fire. That one might look good. Even though it says fire, it still may look good. There's dense, that's what I wanted. So you'll kind of go through and pick out which one you like best. Maybe that one would work. I think I like the fire one the best though. Yeah, it's kind of spotty. I'll go with that one. That one's cool. All right. You can play with it further. So all of these are based off of black and white. That's all we're generating here, just random black and white images. The scale of it, as this scale comes up, you'll see that the pattern goes up. So this tiny bit of white that we were seeing is now this big, so it's not going to be as obvious. Okay. As this scale comes down, we'll see more of that pattern all over the top of it. Okay. So you'll really have to go through and kind of tweak what you want these to look like. Don't always look at it from up close. Go back to where your camera was and then look at it, because here it may look good, but then when you get way far back here, you may not even notice it. Okay? I'll remember that when I go over there. There's no animation on this, which is fine. We don't need animation on that. If I needed something to be stretched, I could stretch it out just in one direction. If I wanted something kind of stripey like this. I don't in this case. Cool, so that's it. Now I can go back to the bump, and if the bump is too strong, I can, or not strong enough, I can make it stronger, or I can pull this down and soften it. So most of the time when we zoom back out, I may just adjust this one number to get that to work correctly from far away. You'll notice that it looks like it's bumping out. If I go the other way, it'll look like it's denting in, okay? So I think I want that to be dented in like that. That's cool. And now I go to my cupcake wrapper. For this, use reference when you need to, right? Cupcake wrapper. Think of a color scheme that you're going to be using. You don't want to have 75 different colors on here, red, greens, blues, yellows, oranges, all that. You want to have something that's kind of consistent. So for mine, I'm going to go with pastels, and then I'll have like deep colors of those pastels in there. So pink, blue, yellow, white will be my main colors. I will have some dark blues, some dark purpley pink colors, some really bright, vibrant yellow colors. And then I'll have some chocolate and stuff like that, but I won't have like a million colors. So for this, if I go to this pink area, I could definitely just pick a color here. There you go. And that's a pastel-y kind of pink, and that could definitely work. I could also go to my texture and go to gradient. And then if I click on the gradient, this will let me choose that pink. There it is. And then I could also go to this one and choose maybe a brighter. Why aren't you opening? I broke it already. Yeah. It's not responding. It is frozen. Let's go back to this. There we go. So let's say that I wanted more of a deep purpley pink color in there. I could use that. And now what I can also do is, my plan is that I would stripe it. That's what I want to do. So if I push these two close together like this, you'll see how we basically get a stripe down the middle. And then when this is on there, if I open this up, I go to that material, I could then say tile it in the U direction or the V direction. As I try the V direction, you'll see it does nothing. Nothing's happening. If I go to the U direction, oh, there it goes. And now we have stripes, right? So I could go in the gradient and try to make the stripes. This way is a lot easier. So when you're doing like a candy cane, or you're doing some kind of fancy candy that would have different colors, think about ways you could use that as well. Cool, so that works. I am going to go to this cake one and just change this from UV mapping to spherical. I think that would give it a little bit nicer motion, or nicer layout. On UV, if you look at it, you'll see I get a weird transition from here to there. Like this looks nice and clear, and that looks fuzzy. By changing this to spherical, the whole thing is consistently fuzzy, but then I could jump back into this, go to the bump, go to the noise, knock the scale down, maybe 5%. There we go. And now it's more overall the same consistency. Cool. All right, so now I jump back to where I have my camera stuff set up. I go to my cloner, and there they are. Okay, so let me save. Now, it's going to get annoying always jumping back and forth, like, what does my camera look like? Now I want to edit something. What does my camera look like? What do I want to edit something? So I recommend, as early as you can, right after you get your scene in there, is to start creating a camera that you'll use kind of as a guide. It doesn't have to be locked in place, but just as a guide for where you're going to put your other stuff. So I created a camera, just like we've done before. I'll look through it. And then I'm going to set up my focal length. So if I set it to 20, super wide focal length, right? If I set it to 80, there we go. Or sorry, narrow was the other one. Wide was narrow. All right, so 80 seems like a good one for where I'm at. Am I in a mountain? I was in a mountain. There we go. And then what I think helps too when you're setting up a camera, just create an object. Like I know I want my building and stuff over here. So I want to see the river, so it's going to be like right there, okay? So I created a small object, I hit O, and now I have something I can pivot around to help set that up. So that's where I'm going to be putting my environment. And maybe 80 was a little bit too much. Let's go with 60. Yeah, that should be good there. Okay. So now I'm going to take my camera. I'm going to go to tags. I'm going to go to Cinema 4D tags, and one of these tags is lock. Protection. There we go. And I'm locking the translates, the scales, and the rotates. So now I can't move that camera around. Okay? So that way when I'm done, I'm working on something, I jump out, I do whatever I want to. I'm going to bring in my next piece of candy, and then when I want to see what it looks like, jump back to the camera. Okay? Really simple to get to the camera, see what it looks like, jump out and do your stuff. So now let's grab another item. So I'll go to candy, turn this off. Let's go to blow pop. Now if I textured something inside here, all those textures come with it too. So feel free to texture something inside this area and bring it to the other one too if you want to. Okay? I'm just going to texture it in the other one. So I'm going to copy this, go to my Candy World demo, click here, paste it. And then this is where I have the blow pops. These are way too big. The pivot's in the wrong spot. As you start going, you realize, before you do anything, this is stuff that I need to do. I need to move the pivot. This should be at the very bottom. It can be just above the bottom. That way, in case it hits the ground, it'll go into the ground versus sticking above it, okay? If you go here, you might get something where it's sticking above the ground. There, it's going to be in the ground, if anything. I'll hit L again. That stick is a little bit too big, so I'm going to take that cylinder and just thin it out just a hair. Good. All right, so now I want to clone this as well. So I'll save that. Now with this one, I want to clone it in a specific spot, okay? So over here in this area, like let's say around, let me jump to my camera again so I can get the right spot. Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, so right around here, I want to clone these blow pops right in that area. I could just duplicate my blow pop and just move it over there, but I want to do it in a way where if I wanted 1 or 50 or 1,000, I could very quickly change that. So I'm going to go to my subdivision surface. I'm going to go to my live selection. I'm going to go to faces. And I'm just going to click and drag where I want these blow pops to end up. Okay? And as I hold shift to grab the next selection, I can hold control to deselect ones if I don't like the ones I've selected. And with all of these points on here, all these faces, we really get a lot of area. If we had less divisions, we wouldn't be able to do that. All right, so I have all these areas selected. This is where I want the blow pops to be. My camera is facing here. I don't see any of this. I might see it in reflections, but it's really not worth it for me in this case to use it, so I'm just going to erase that. Okay, maybe that I'll use, and I'll drop some over here too. There we go. It gives me basically a range where I could add more or not. All right, so I'm going to take this and save it. So I'm going to go to select, set selection. And this gives me a little triangle. That selection I can use for other stuff, which you'll see. So I'm going to call this blow pop forest. So I'm going to go to the blow pop. I'm going to go to my cloner. I held Alt so it drops it in there. I'm going to start naming things because as I get cloner 1, cloner 2, cloner 3, it's going to be difficult to discern which is which. Cloner blow pop, cloner cupcake. There we go. All right, so I'm cloning the blow pops. I'm going to change this from, instead of linear or grid, I'm going to change it to object. And then I have to pick which object do I want this to clone on. If I click this, it's going to freak out, so I will not click that yet. I'm going to turn my cloner off, go to the cloner, then drag that object onto it. Okay? If I were to have left this on, it would clone a blow pop at every single one of the vertices on there, meaning I would probably have like 1 trillion blow pops all over this thing. No, it would freeze. You can see it on yours. I just don't see it on mine. Save before you do, though. So I have to tell it I want this to be on the surface. And then what it'll do now is it'll duplicate this 20 times around the entire surface, just like I did the sprinkles on top of that cake pop. Okay. Now I can turn it on, and it'll just give me 20 of them kind of randomly around. Now I'm going to use this selection to drag that triangle to this. And what it's going to do is it's only going to duplicate inside those areas. So now as I take this count up, you'll see how it's duplicating just in those areas where we had them. Obviously, they're not facing the correct direction. We'll turn align clones off. That way they're all facing straight up. We'll also go to random on that cloner. And that way we can control things like, we don't need to control the Y. The Y should be at 0 for all these. But we can control the scale. So uniform, absolute. If I set it to 0.1, it makes it 0.1 bigger. If you want things to scale down, you have to go negative, which is kind of weird. Negative 0.9. There we go. If I went to negative 0.1, it would scale it to nothing, to 0, because it's like the opposite of it. Okay, so 0.9 as a negative gives me these tiny baby trees, which is cute. Cool. And then I can go back to my cloner, and I can crank this number up. It's at 9,000. I don't have 9,000 here. It's duplicating over this entire plane 9,000 times, and then whatever areas have that selection, it's leaving those and getting rid of the rest. So you have to go for like a lot sometimes. That's too much. There we go. To really fill in areas if you need them. So now let's jump back to our camera. Let's go and create some materials here. So this will be blow pop. And for this, we're going to go with, let's say, for now we'll do a vibrant red. I'll come back and tweak my colors after, once I'm trying to sew everything together. Looking at what a blow pop looks like, again, looking at reference. It's not really see-through, and the reflections on it are kind of like scuffed, mainly from that. Let's see, this one. This one, because it's wet, is like perfectly reflective, okay? So it's not a whole lot of roughness on it. It's pretty reflective. I don't want it to look like chrome, so I'm not going to pull it that high, but like that's good. We do have some bump on it, so I'll go to the bump. A lot of these you'll probably use that noise, just so you have some kind of random noise pattern on top of it. And in here you'll just pick, like, you know, what's going to look good. Maybe that one. No. Yeah, that one looks kind of cool. Okay, I'll make this a little bit bigger. All right, it's hard to see there, but it's there. Let's go back to the bump and crank up this number some. And then go back to the noise, and then make this bigger. There we go. All right, so you can kind of see it there. Now I'm going to take this and drop this onto the actual blow pop sphere. And then I'll have another one that I call paper handle. This might be used for several of them. If I bring in my cake pops, same little paper handle. If I bring in a sucker or a lollipop or whatever, same paper handle. Okay. So color most likely will be white. My reflectance on this will most likely be Beckman. Crank this up. Pull that down. Again, I'm looking at this. So I want it to be pretty much white. And then if I wanted to give it a little bump, I could. Again, it just adds a nice little layer to it. You can also go under effects and go under surfaces. These are two different areas where you may find like a different thing. It's all looking at black and white. So if I went to Earth, let's say, this is a map of the Earth, put on a straw or a piece of paper, it might look cool. In this case, obviously not, it doesn't work, but here's stars. Oops. Here's flames, and so on. Okay, and then under effects, these are different kinds of effects. I don't think any of these were appropriate for what we're doing now. No, nothing. So I'll just go to noise for this, and I'll take this down to like 2, and then I'll take the scale down to 20 or so. Again, just so I have some kind of representation of variations there. All right, so now I will save. And then I can jump out of my camera and just take a look and see, what things are looking like. Just deselect. Oops. There you go. So that looks pretty much like a blow pop would look, right? We could add more to this depending on what we want to do. We'll get more into it as we go, right? A lot of the times it's more about just getting your stuff on there versus tweaking it until it looks absolutely perfect. Because once you add lighting to your scene, that's going to change how things are going to look. Once you add other items to your scene, like a background and whatever else, that'll change how things look. So I don't care so much right now if I pick the exact red or pink or blue or whatever I want. I care more about having these down here, then I can come back and tweak those things. Okay? So that should give you plenty to keep going with this. Next class when we come in, I'll go over some more things, like let's say I don't want all of these blow pops to be red. I'll show you the quick way to do it today, and then I'll show you the faster way to do it next time, okay? So if I take this blow pop and I just duplicate it several times, there we go, and I duplicate this as many times. And I'm just going to go into each one of these and just change the colors. That one's blue, this one is green. And again, I'm not worried about the color so much right now, I'll worry about that after. And then I just replace this. So this one is yellow. I'm dropping it right on. This one is green. And this one is blue. You'll see how then I get a variety of colors inside there. So that's the quick way to do it. There's another way that will allow us a bit more control, except for duplicating and changing all these things. Okay, so I'll show that next class. Cool. Any questions on this yet?